Hi, and welcome to another episode of Lifestyle Unlimited. You know, Peter, I know a lot of times we talk about, real estate, we talk about, life, different business adventures, but I will tell you there's some embarrassing things that's happened, along the years, right? So we wanted to lighten this up a little bit today and kind of tell some stories. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm all about self-degradation. And I
Yeah,
guess
why not?
it's also about just relatability. A lot of times I remember when I got started, whether it was in real estate or the merchant services business, I did that. I did some vending businesses before then. You kind of look up at these successful guys and you're like, I could never do that. And you have no idea what they went through. This is not a funny one, but I will just tell you something that for me, like just now, I was just watching some reels on Instagram, and there's this thing about Grant Cardone, right? Yeah. And right now he's got a Learjet, 2 helicopters, just bought a brand new house.
He's almost looking younger and younger these days. Have y'all noticed that?
Well, that's probably part of something to do with money.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, it was just interesting them talking about his first 12 or 15 years in the business, how he drove this old Corolla. Bottom line, it's just. I think it helps kind of poking fun at each other. It makes more relatable. It just gives people a reality check that, we were there exactly where they were. We did some crazy things to get by. But since it was your idea, you start.
Well, I love that, talking about kind of how you got to where you are. And, everybody wants to look at the end game, but it takes a lot to get there. So I'll tell you a story. This was a little bit embarrassing, especially as a female and as a mother. So, man, back in the day, after my first daughter, she was born, right? Actually, I didn't have a chance to wait the 6 weeks to go back to work. Because honestly, I had no plan. It's like if I didn't go to work, I wasn't getting paid. So I took this job. Selling lawn care, right? So I would literally go and knock on people's doors. And when I would knock on doors, I'd literally pull a weed out of the grass and I'd be like, hey, you got this in your yard. If you hire our company, we'll come in and, get the yard looking pristine, right? So I remember, it's literally was July in Georgia and it was hot. And I'm just driving down the road, just finding yards with weeds in them and knocking on the door. Well, it's about late afternoon, and by the way, at the time I was still breastfeeding, right, my daughter. And I go up to this house and I'm knocking on the door. And I'm telling this man all about everything that's wrong with his yard that I was taught. And I'm like, man, I'm going to get the sale. And he just keeps looking down at my breast. And I'm thinking, okay, well, it's not like they're super or anything. I don't understand why you're in the middle of the day just staring at my breast. And he's like, ma'am, whatever you're selling, I am going to buy because by the looks of things, it looks like you need it. Literally, I looked down. And my entire shirt was soaking wet. And I'd been out knocking on doors, talking to all these people. And because it was so hot, I didn't realize that my whole entire shirt was soaked in breast milk. And this man was like, I will sign up for whatever you're selling. Too bad I didn't have a higher end offer to tell him, right? But it's just, about doing what you have to do.
Yeah, no question.
I didn't want to do that at 3-4 weeks after I just had a baby, but I had no choice. But I'll never forget that moment and that guy because he was really, really kind of gracious, and didn't embarrass me. But I did make the sale.
Well, there you go. Whatever it takes. All right. So speaking of having to do what you have to do, right? This is kind of a funny one, but it teaches a lesson also because sometimes I've learned we make bad decisions when things are going bad. Right, because we start panicking, we start freaking out, we start getting scared. So this is so my partner Jeff and I. This is when the market crashed in '08, right? So my partner Jeff and I, we were desperate. We were losing real estate, we were losing houses, everything was crashing. And so he and I were just one night, just thinking what are we gonna do, right? And he came up with this crazy idea. He goes, well, those trash hauling businesses? He goes, why don't we do some trash hauling businesses, right?
Like the ones where like you like have a bunch of junk at your house. I think it's we
Yeah,
got junk. Or
yeah,
1-800
exactly,
junk.
one of those.
Yeah.
Now, back then, since we had just come out of the real estate business, we had some contacts in real estate, right? And so we started calling some of our contacts with companies that were, foreclosing on properties. All those properties always need clean out, right?
Yeah.
So we got a couple of gigs to clean out properties, right?
Yeah.
Now, again, we're in the dumps. Everything is just crashing around us. It was just bad time. And so we're like, why don't we just kind of start the side hustle, and maybe then we get a truck, and you start thinking that we get 10 trucks, and we get 30 employees, and we had this big thing built. But in the beginning, we had to figure out how to do it ourselves. So we rented this truck, right? Because we couldn't afford to buy a truck back then.
Yeah.
So we were renting a truck, and so I remember we were given a mobile home to clean out, right? And I mean, you could imagine, like when somebody gets foreclosed on.
I've flipped those kind of houses.
Yeah, so you get the idea, and they're kind of already lower end because they're living in a mobile home in a trailer. It's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's just the scenario is just. And I remember opening this mobile home up, and I kid you not, they did take their stuff, but they had literally like crap, not crap, bad, but real crap. I don't know what
like
else.
feces.
Yes, there you go. I didn't know what you could say on unrecorded stuff. All over the floor, right? And so Jeff had a shovel, I got a shovel, and I remember he kind of started one end of the mobile home, I started the other end of the mobile home, and we're shoveling crap. What else can I say? And then we kind of get next to each other, like I'm standing here, he's standing in front of me, and we're looking at each other like, by the way, we were getting paid $70.
Oh,
so
Lord.
this would take us. We were like half a day into this thing. I mean, it takes a while to detrash a place, especially when you're just two guys, right?
Well, when you're in the beginning though, you don't think it takes that much time.
Oh my God, you had no idea.
Yeah.
And I remember Jeff and I we kind of met in the middle of the mobile home. We're cleaning this crap. We're shoveling it. And we kind of look at each other like, what are we doing? And it was just like 6 months ago. We were in the top of the world. We were killing it, and then just the market took a dive, and we're just looking at each other. And
now we're splitting $7.
And well, at the end it probably wasn't even 7 because we had to rent the truck. We spend money buying the shovels. You know what I mean? Took a gas money to get there, and then we were probably $7 is what we were making, and we're just like looking at each other like, what are we doing here? Like we were at the top of our game, and it was kind of a funny thing looking back at it. But I will tell you that was our turning point. Now Jeff never got back into real estate. Obviously I did, and here we are. Many years later, he ended up going somewhere else, and obviously I got back into real estate. But sometimes it's just those kind of funny, degrading moments. They kind of snap you back into reality, and I'll tell you that one snapped me and Jeff back to reality. Like I said, we ended up going our separate ways at that point.
Did y'all finish the job?
I don't think so. I didn't come to think of it, because I was thinking before we started this, and I was recollecting that I think we just walked out. I think we're just like, this is crazy, and that was the last job we ever did like that. And within a couple months, I made my entry back into real estate. He went back into the services, and so funny, but yet kind of. The lesson is that sometimes when things are really down, we make stupid decisions.
Yep.
And we make stupid decisions based just upon circumstances.
Which is different than saying you've got to do everything you can do, or you got to work harder. You know what I mean?
Totally different. It was a stupid decision. Because had we figured out ahead of time that we were walking out with like $5 a piece, you know what I mean? And that really real estate is it's where we made it all, and it's where we had to stick it out. And so it's snapped us back in reality. So you got any more?
Oh God, I've got tons of all the things I had to do to work. Actually, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when I started, with you long ago, and I was making the calls and doing all that stuff during the day, I decided to pick up a second job, right? And I thought, okay, well, I don't want to go to like a store or retail place to get the second job. I wanted to be more like entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
So what I did is for South County News, they were hiring people to deliver papers. And on paper, it seemed like, okay, well, I could make $7,500 a night, right? Okay, so the first day I go there, they give me my route, they give me all the newspapers. First thing you got to do is roll up all the newspapers, put them in bags. If you're not used to it, that takes a couple hours in itself. Then it took me 9 hours to run a paper route because you're doing it in the middle of the night. And I was in the part of town that, like, I did not know, right? So I'm driving down these roads, missing it, trying to read addresses at dark. Like, there were so many times I'll never forget in the middle of the night. It was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm halfway through. And I'm thinking, well, I got to be at work at, like, to go do this other thing at 9 a.m. But, so do I just quit and, like, just tell them not to pay me? Or, like, you know, or these people paid for their newspaper and it didn't get delivered today. Then they're going to call the paper and they might cancel. And it's going to be all my fault. So I finished that paper route that night. But let me tell you, delivering newspapers is not a way to make any type of money whatsoever. I don't understand how anybody makes a dollar. Maybe back in the old days, but it was like at the time when newspapers were going out, internet was coming in. Yeah, that didn't work for me either.
That's funny. I wasn't gonna share the story. I still won't. But I actually did newspaper delivery myself, believe it or not, and I did it like you, only for one night. I can't remember what happened. I was much younger, and I remember I did someone's route, and I said, "This is crazy. How somebody would want to do this is insane." So, but okay, I got another funny one. I know you said stay away from real estate, but this is kind of sideline real estate. So you know, Bob and I, we got into lending. So Bob's a friend of mine, and so we got into hard money lending, right? And I remember one time. And so the way we do it is kind of the way I run the business. You know, I was kind of the guy behind, coming up with ideas, and Bob was more out in the field. So he would go out in the field. So I remember one time I'm sitting here, I'm calling Bob, I'm talking on the phone, and I'm like look at my phone, and I'm like, Bob, are you throwing up? He's like, yeah, I'm throwing up. I go, what's wrong? Because you're not going to believe it. Now, back then, we were charging so high. We were charging 15 points. Can you imagine? 15 points we were charged. Can you imagine the borrowers, like the quality of the borrowers that we had?
So just so everybody knows what that means, okay? So a point stands for like a percentage rate on an upfront fee. So if you borrow $100,000, that's 15 grand of points
up front, right?
Up front.
But that's what we had to borrow. That's what we had to charge because that's how high we were borrowing money for. We were borrowing it like at 7 or 8 points. Anyways, so crazy story. But so when you're charging 15 points, not only are you worried about the quality of the borrower, somebody's who's going to pay 15 points, you can imagine. But you also got to do things for these people, right? So one of the things we had to do is we had to front them money all the time. So they would buy, let's say, a house. For $100,000, let's say they needed 50 to fix it, right? So a traditional point, you fix 20,000, you call the bank, they inspect it and all this. Well, when you're charging 15 points, we had to release that 50 up front. Just like that was like our incentive. Hey, with us, you get your whole escrow up front. You can imagine the kind of problems that created.
Oh Lord, yeah.
But this was a crazy one. So I'm calling Forbes up. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? He's like, are you throwing? He's like, oh, I'm throwing up. So what happened is we had released the majority of an escrow up front, like we always did, because that's what you have to do, right? And the guy ended up fixing the house next door.
Oh, God.
So the house that we were financing was this house here, and the borrower was fixing the house right there. And I'm like, well, he didn't spend a lot of money. And Bob's like, oh, it throws up again. He's like, I think he spent all the money on that.
Oh, my gosh.
And I just remember, it was absolutely crazy. Anyway, wait, I got another funny story with Bob.
Okay.
So again, back to our lending business. So when you're lending at these points, you get these crazy borrowers, right? Mm-hmm. And so I remember one of our borrowers was, he wasn't doing anything. Like he was not like the house. It was a small apartment we financed for this guy, and he was just sitting on it. Well, remember, we're lending it out at 15%, right? But we're borrowing it like 8%, 8 points, mm-hmm. right? So we got to make payments, right? So if the longer the project sits, we're getting screwed in the back end because we got to pay for this money. And so we're trying to figure out. Like I remember I'm sitting with Bob. I'm like, what do we do? And I'm not going to get into it on the camera, but Bob's got a little bit of a shady past. And so, so Bob's like, I know exactly what we're going to do. He said, we're going to talk to, I think the guy's name was Jason. We met him on site in this apartment. He said, but here's what's going to happen if you think the conversation is going sideways, just give me a code word. And we came up with the word like green or something, right? If you say green, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to just scare the kabunkers out of this guy. And so we're talking to Jason, and the conversation is going nowhere. I could just tell this guy has no intention fixing it. We got all these payments that's due on the money. Obviously, we know he's never going to pay us back. And so finally, I'm just like, we're talking. I'm like, yeah, maybe you should paint in green. And, and Bob, have you met Bob? You know, nice guy, right?
Yeah.
Bob lost his blank on him. He just got in his face like this close, and he literally scared the gabunkers out of Jason. I mean, I just never seen a man scare another man like this. And the funny thing is, Jason got to work, and we never really got paid what we needed to, but at least we got out of that deal. But
that's hilarious. You're like, green. No, never mind. Pink.
He just went nuts on him.
Yeah. Well, I hope you enjoyed the stories of today on Lifestyle Unlimited. Go ahead, subscribe, ring that bell, and we'll see you soon.